Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the U.S., and one of the first podcasts on the Internet, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the Earth as we come to air with edition number 1414 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The FCC finds a Florida resident for pirate radio broadcasting. An amateur operator is charged with interference to emergency services. The radio, which is always on the air with a buzz, begins transmitting voice announcements. Amateurs in Norway have new regulations to follow. The Las Vegas Amateur Radio Club celebrates 65 years. The Voice of America Museum announces extended operational hours during the upcoming Hamvention. The Artemis 2 mission deployed several CubeSats. The ARRL program announces new opportunities for space station contacts during 2027. The NOAA receives funds to upgrade their transmitters and expand their coverage areas. And we will tell you how amateurs in the Azores activate their first 10-meter repeater. That and a lot more are straight ahead in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benshoff, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will present Part 18 of his ongoing Bald Yak radio project. This edition is entitled Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another new edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us back to 1924, where we find that a year or so after QST first began its International Amateur Radio Department, amateurs were discussing linking amateur radio organizations around the world. In a speech at the Second ARRL National Convention in late 1923, Hiram Percy Maxim said he believed it was time for an international meeting to organize something he called a World Amateur Radio League. This is where the International Amateur Radio Union was born. We will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyer's AJ8B in the DX Corner with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming contests, and a lot more. And we will have this month's report from the Volunteer Monitoring Program. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio just outside of Albany, New York, where the weather is finally showing signs of spring, I'm George, W2XBS.
Reporting from our news bureau in beautiful Bradenton, Florida, where I'm attending 3 games between the Rays and the Chicago Cubs with my buddy Eric, I'm Mike Nicolich, K9DX Mike.
Reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, this is George, Kilo Charlie 2, Oscar X-Ray Juliet.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in downtown Syracuse, New York, where March came in like a lion, but finally I see blue skies, hear birds chirping, and there's no more snow. Must be March is going to go out like a lamb. I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
Coming to you from a rather nippy, but still sunny Space Coast in Florida, I'm Ed Johnsen, W2PH.
And reporting from our New York News Bureau, in the midst of April showers, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our Catskill Mountain outpost in upstate New York, where the continuing mud season will make Easter egg hunts look more like searching the La Brea tar pits. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where snow is once again in the forecast, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, Isn't spring just around the corner?
Hello, everyone. Before we get into this week's newscast, I'd like to tell everyone that This Week in Amateur Radio now has its own Discord server. That's right, a place online where we can discuss everything technology and amateur radio. So join us. Just go to Discord on your computer or download the Discord app on your portable device and search for TWIAR or This Week in Amateur Radio. We look forward to seeing you on the new This Week in Amateur Radio Discord server. Today's edition of This Week in Amateur Radio is 100% human.
Leading off your news this week, the Federal Communications Commission has upheld a $60,000 fine against a South Florida man for allegedly operating a pirate radio station. The FCC says Aaron Streeter allegedly operated an unauthorized radio station on 89.1 FM known as the Pound FM in Miami Gardens, Florida. Last year it proposed the fine for the violation, and after never receiving a response, the commission has formalized the penalty. It was 2 years ago that agents from the FCC's Miami field office monitored and traced the unauthorized signal to a single-family residence with a broadcast antenna in the rear of their property. The agents talked to Streeter's wife, who had her husband call agents later that afternoon. He allegedly told them during the phone call that he operated the station and agreed to cease broadcasting. However, on January 8th, the FCC says agents returned to the area and once again heard the Pound FM on the air. In its annual report to Congress on pirate radio, the FCC also said it issued 28 notices to property owners and managers last year, including 17 connected directly to pirate radio sweeps. But that was down from 41 notices issued to property owners and managers during fiscal 2024.
An amateur radio operator is being called the source of radio interference that affected emergency service frequencies in one part of Pennsylvania last year, according to the Federal Communications Commission. The FCC's Enforcement Bureau has charged a ham radio operator in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, with interfering with UHF frequencies used by 911 emergency services. The FCC identified the ham as David Knutson, KD3ASC. According to the agency, the Pittsburgh amateur was transmitting on 470.4375 MHz from a handheld transceiver last July, prompting a complaint from the county's emergency services that there was interference on its dispatch channel. Using direction finding, the borough's enforcement agents tracked the signal to Knutson's home, where, they said, he showed them a Baofeng BTEC UV Pro HT, which he surrendered to them. The handheld radio is capable of transmitting on VHF and UHF amateur radio bands, as well as private land mobile radio bands. The FCC said the radio had been programmed to monitor the EMS channel, and that the audio relay was enabled, permitting traffic from one channel to be transmitted on another. The FCC notice is dated March 25th. Knutson must respond to the Enforcement Bureau within 10 days of that date.
The Intercontinental Amateur Traffic Net is seeking additional net control stations to staff open slots in the mornings or as occasional relief operators. The net operates every morning at 0700 through noon Eastern Time on 14.3 megahertz. Net control stations work 1-hour shifts. The Intercon Net was formed in 1960 to promote goodwill and friendly relations among radio amateurs everywhere. The net handles third-party traffic and provides emergency communications to any station when needed, and offers operating training and improvement programs to its members. The Maritime Mobile Service Net, which is a different organization, takes over on the same frequency at noon Eastern Time. They share their proprietary logging program with the Intercon Net. All licensed general class amateur radio operators are welcome to check in. Visit interconnet.us for more information.
The Doomsday Radio is a Russian-based shortwave radio station that has been sending out a faint buzz and nothing else for 50 years. But last week, the Doomsday Radio started sending out one key word again and again. That word, dezigator, which in Russian translates to decontaminator or degasser. The question is why? We have developed new technology that places security and our privacy as the top priority, but this tech message has baffled the most enthusiastic radio operators. Many experts and scientists have believed for years that the Doomsday Radio was a failsafe for nuclear war. In March of this year, the station suddenly wakes up from its slumber and sends 16 voice messages out in a single day. This is usually associated with rising geopolitical tensions around the world. Some fear that this could be a prerequisite for new military actions, with the station also mentioning NATO countries like Latvia. But despite all this, the most likely explanation is that these are merely military orders or tests.
Amateur radio operators in Norway have a number of new regulations, including a new entry-level license. The Norwegian Communications Authority has approved an entry-level license for amateurs as one of the several changes taking effect. The entry-level or limited 10-watt license covers 80, 40, 20, 17, 15, 10, 6, and 2-meter bands, as well as the 70-centimeter band. Other changes include the removal of limitations to hams wishing to operate stations remotely, especially in Norway's overseas territories. The changes also affect the 23-centimeter band, which will now follow International Amateur Radio Union recommendations more directly. Again, remote control limitations have been lifted in Norway, specifically the limitation over remote operation in Norwegian territories, and the 23-centimeter band is now more closely adhering to CEPT recommendations.
Hamvention has released the theme and logo for the 2026 Dayton Hamvention show that will take place May 15th through the 17th. This year's theme is Radio Adventure, which references exploration of the many avenues ham radio offers. Radio has always been about exploration of ideas, technologies, distances, and possibilities. From the earliest spark gap pioneers to today's digital experimenters, satellite operators, contesters, emergency communicators, and outdoor enthusiasts, amateur radio continues to be a gateway to discovery. Once again, the Hamvention will take place May 15th through the 17th at the Greene County Fairgrounds and Expo Center in Xenia, Ohio.
The Las Vegas Amateur Radio Club will be celebrating its 65th anniversary the weekend of April 4th, 2026. To tell us more about the anniversary, we go to John Ross, K8IDJ, who files this report.
Club President Charlie Shepard, K7CBS, said LVRAC is the oldest amateur radio club in Las Vegas, has been active in the Clark County community since April of 1961, and is an ARRL-affiliated club. The club began in the kitchen of Jerry Mann, W7VYC, later N7CAH, and now a Silent Key, said Shepard. Our first meeting was held as a picnic on Mount Charleston, and 150 people attended. Mount Charleston, which is snow-capped more than half the year, can be seen from parts of the Las Vegas Strip when looking west. Mount Charleston has nearly 200 campsites and over 150 picnic areas, some of which are RV accessible. The mountain is also known for its multitude of radio and television towers and antennas. In the early days of the LVRAC, the club was contacted by Joe Wells, then the head of the Thunderbird Hotel, who wanted to establish a ham station in the hotel. He offered to purchase the equipment and provide a room to which build a station. He bought the equipment and all the necessary accessories to equip a fully functional amateur radio station. And then a glass-windowed room, completely visible to the hotel's patrons, was built to house the station. The popular and colorful Thunderbird sign at the hotel stuck with the club and has been its logo for more than half a century. We have a special event on Saturday, April 4th, beginning at 8 a.m. at the Red Rock Search and Rescue Facility, said Shepard. Radios and antennas will be set up, and everyone is invited to come celebrate and operate. And there will be pictures and additional information on the club's YouTube channel. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
The ARRL reminds all clubs to send them stories and photos about your radio club celebrations and milestones during the year of the club. Email them to news@arrl.org.
Chris Stelkamp, Kilo India Zero Delta of Selby, South Dakota, has been appointed Vice Director of the ARRL Dakota Division. ARRL President Rick Roderick, Kilo 5 Uniform Romeo, appointed Stelkamp, who has been South Dakota Section Manager since 2012. Stelkamp, an ARRL Life member, has been a radio amateur since 2006 and holds an extra-class license. He's a member of the Black Hills Amateur Radio Club and Lake Area Radio Club in South Dakota, the Twin Cities DX Association, and the Minnesota Wireless Association. Interest in amateur radio runs in his family. his mother, Margaret, Kilo Alpha Zero, Bravo Echo Brava, and father, Lloyd, November Oscar, 7 Golf, of Havre, Montana, are both amateur radio operators. Stallkamp works as a sales agronomist for Agri Partners. The ARRL Dakota Division includes Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota.
The Amateur Radio on the International Space Station, or ARRS program, is seeking formal and informal educational institutions and organizations, individually or working together, to host an amateur radio contact with a crew member on board the ISS. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with the details.
ARRS anticipates that contact will be held between January 1st and June 30th of 2027. The deadline to submit a proposal is May 22nd, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. The proposal information and necessary details are on the ARRS website, as well as information on an ARRS introductory webinar session that will be held April 30th at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. An ARRS contact is a voice-only communication opportunity via amateur radio between astronauts and cosmonauts aboard the space station and classrooms and communities. Amateur radio organizations around the world, with the support of NASA and space agencies in Russia, Canada, Japan, and Europe, present educational organizations with this opportunity. The ham radio organization's volunteer efforts provide the equipment and operational support to enable communication between the crew on the ISS and students around the world using amateur radio. And if you have any questions, you can direct them directly to arrs.usa.org. Amateur Radio and the International Space Station ARRS is a cooperative venture of international amateur radio societies and the space agencies that support the International Space Station. In the United States, sponsors are the American Radio Relay League, ARRL, Amateur Radio Digital Communications, ARDC, Radio Amateur Satellite Corporations, AMSAT, NASA's Space Communications and Navigation Program, C-SCAN, and the ISS National Lab, Space Station Explorer. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Crew members will participate in scheduled amateur radio contacts. These radio contacts are approximately 10 minutes in length and allow students to interact with the astronauts through a question and answer session. Crew scheduling and ISS orbits will determine the exact contact dates. To maximize these radio contact opportunities, ARRS is looking for organizations that will draw large numbers of participants and integrate the contact into a well-developed education plan. The deadline to submit a proposal is May 22, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time. Proposal information and necessary details are available on the ARRS USA website. ARRS contacts afford education audiences the opportunity to learn firsthand from astronauts what it is like to live and work in space and to learn about space research conducted on the ISS. Students also will have an opportunity to learn about satellite communication, wireless technology, and radio science. Because of the nature of human spaceflight and the complexity of scheduling activities aboard the ISS, organizations must demonstrate flexibility to accommodate changes in dates and times of the radio contact.
The next set of images to be transmitted from the International Space Station via SSTV will mark a number of high-profile moments in space. The 65th anniversary of the first human spaceflight by cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, the 45th anniversary of the first space shuttle flight, and the 100th anniversary of the world's first liquid-propelled rocket launch by Robert Goddard. These are 3 of several space achievements being commemorated by amateur radio on the International Space Station through its selection of images to be transmitted as part of SSTV Series 31. The SSTV mode will be Robot 36, and there will be 2 minutes between transmissions. Transmissions will begin on the 10th of April and continue to the 14th of April. The frequency will be 437.550 MHz plus or minus Doppler shift.
Fuji Oscar 29, otherwise known as FO-29 and JAS-2, the Japanese amateur radio satellite launched in August 1996, has entered a period of full sunlight, resulting in renewed and more frequent transponder activity. The inverting analog transponder operates with an uplink passband of 145.900 through 146.000 MHz lower sideband, and a downlink of 435.800 through 435.900 MHz upper sideband, along with a CW beacon at 435.795 MHz. The satellite's 1-watt PEP output is shared across the 100 kHz bandwidth, making careful power management essential for all users. Although the FO-29 linear transponder is technically capable of passing narrowband digital signals such as FT8, FT4, PSK31, or Olivia, such operations are not permitted under the satellite's original licensing from Japanese authorities. The transponder is explicitly licensed for SSB and CW modes only. This restriction stems from the satellite's operational permit issued by Japan's Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, which does not authorize digital emissions on the linear transponder frequencies. Operators attempting digital modes risk non-compliance with international amateur radio etiquette and could contribute to transponder overload, distortion, or temporary shutdowns, issues exacerbated by the high duty cycle nature of many digital signals. AMSAT urges all users to limit their operations on FO29 to SSB and CW and to practice good satellite etiquette as follows. Use the minimum power necessary to produce a readable downlink signal. Ensure your downlink signal strength does not exceed the CW beacon level. Monitor the transponder before and during your transmission. If the beacon weakens or the passband becomes noisy, reduce power immediately. Keep signals clean and within the passband. Share the limited resource responsibly so that the maximum number of amateurs worldwide can enjoy FO29 while it remains active. With the satellite now enjoying extended full sunlight operation in 2026, this is an excellent time to explore its capabilities through permitted modes. Experimentation with unauthorized modes is discouraged to preserve the satellite's health and comply with licensing.
It is the beginning of a new month, and that means it is time for the Volunteer Monitor Program Report. The Volunteer Monitor Program is a joint initiative between the ARRL and the FCC to enhance compliance in the amateur radio service. This is the most recent activity report of the Volunteer Monitor Program. An operator in California was issued an advisory notice concerning a beacon on a 60-meter frequency not authorized to operators in the United States. Technician operators in Michigan and Oregon were issued advisory notices for 40-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians only have CW privileges. Technician operators in Illinois and Florida were issued advisory notices for 20-meter FT8 operation, a band on which technicians have no privileges. An advisory notice was issued to a resident in Bay Point, California, concerning unlicensed 2-meter transmissions from the property. An operator in Connecticut was issued a commendation for outstanding operation of the Hartford-Tolland County Skywarn net on the PVRA repeater system during a snowstorm. The net was operated continuously for 24 hours and relayed information on ground conditions to the National Weather Service. An operator in California was issued a commendation for exceptional courtesy and skill in assisting a POTA operator to change frequencies so that a net could begin operation on 20 meters. Results of the new automated FT4 and FT8 monitoring system are being reviewed. The program appears to be effective in continuously monitoring the frequencies to ensure that operators have the proper license class for the band they are using. There were 3 Volunteer Monitor program presentations to amateur radio clubs in Missouri and Maryland. Further evidence was provided to the FCC in 3 interference cases referred in January of this year. The totals for this month's monitoring were 1,437 hours on HF frequencies and 1,738 hours on VHF frequencies and above, for a total of 3,175 hours. We would like to thank Volunteer Monitor Program Administrator Riley Hollingsworth, K4ZDH, for this report.
The 2026 Dayton Hamvention will be held Friday through Sunday, May 15th through the 16th, 2026, at the Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, Ohio. AMSAT will once again have a strong presence throughout the event, including booth activities, social gatherings, and the annual AMSAT Forum. The 17th annual TAPR and AMSAT Banquet will be held Friday, May 15th at 1830 EDT at the Kohler Presidential Banquet Center, 4548 Presidential Way, Kettering, Ohio 45429, located approximately 20 minutes from the Greene County Fairgrounds. This dinner is a highlight of the Tucson Amateur Packet Radio and AMSAT Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation activities during Hamvention. The banquet speaker will be announced at a later date. Tickets are $75 each and may be purchased through the AMSAT store. The deadline to purchase banquet tickets is Monday, May 11th at 2100 UTC. Tickets must be purchased in advance and will not be sold at the AMSAT booth or at the door. There will be no tickets available for pickup at the AMSAT booth either. Tickets purchased online will be maintained on a list with check-in at the door at the banquet center. Seating is limited to the number of meals reserved with the Kohler caterers based on ticket sales by the deadline. The annual AMSAT Dinner at Tickets gathering will take place Thursday, May 14th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. EDT at Tickets Pub and Eatery, 7 West Main Street, Fairborn, Ohio 45324. This informal event features no program or speaker, offering an opportunity for conversation and camaraderie. All are welcome, regardless of participation in booth setup or operations. Food may be ordered from the menu, and drinks, including beer, wine, sodas, and iced tea, are available at the bar. No reservations are required. AMSAT is seeking volunteers to assist at the AMSAT booth, located in Building 1, booths 1007 through 1010 and 1107 through 1110. Volunteers are encouraged to contribute as much time as they are able, whether for a few hours or the entire weekend. In 2025, approximately 20 volunteers supported AMSAT's activities and engagement with attendees. Those interested in volunteering or requesting additional information may contact Phil Smith, W1EME, AMSAT Hamvention Team Leader, via email at w1eme@astrocom.net. Volunteer participation plays an important role in supporting AMSAT's presence and outreach within the amateur radio community. The AMSAT Forum will be held Saturday, May 16th from 1:50 p.m. to 3:10 p.m. EDT in Forum Room 2. Additional details, including the banquet speaker announcement, will be provided as they become available.
From June 26th through June 28th, 2026, the amateur radio community will gather for the 49th time at Ham Radio in Friedrichshafen, Germany, one of Europe's largest ham fests. Under the motto, Discover the Sky, Amateur Radio meets Astronomy Europe's largest amateur radio exhibition and is taking a step further and shining even brighter with an Astro Trade Fair, which will be held concurrently for the first time on Saturday, June 27th, 2026. We look forward to welcoming renowned companies, new ideas, and a full 3-day program.
When Artemis II lifted off at NASA's Space Launch System this week, 4 international CubeSats will be carried into space inside the Orion stage adapter. The satellites will be deployed into high Earth orbit approximately 5 hours after the launch, following the separation from the upper stage and the Orion spacecraft. The CubeSats will ride along within a ring-shaped adapter structure that connects NASA's Orion to the U.S. interim cryogenic propulsion stage. After Orion separates and establishes a safe distance, an onboard avionics unit inside the adapter will control the deployment, releasing each CubeSat at 1-minute intervals. This system ensures the satellites are deployed safely and without interference as the stage continues on its trajectory. Although Artemis II's primary objective is to send 4 astronauts on a crewed lunar flyby, the CubeSats will carry out independent scientific and technology demonstration missions. By flying as a secondary payload, these satellites provide additional research opportunities. Participating space agencies include the German Aerospace Center, the Korean Aerospace Administration, the Saudi Space Agency, and Argentina's National Commission on Space Activities. The 4 CubeSats will be named Techelles from Germany, ARRL from South Korea, Space Weather CubeSat 1 from Saudi Arabia, and Athena from Argentina. Each satellite is designed to carry out a unique mission. Germany's will study the effects of the space environment on electrical component, helping the entire future of deep space systems. Other payloads will focus on radiation measurements, space weather monitoring, and validation of the new technologies in a high Earth orbit environment. NASA officials note that CubeSats offer a relatively low-cost method to test new technology, although their small size presents a challenge for long-duration missions. The Artemis II CubeSat program highlights the growing role of international cooperation under the Artemis Accords, while expanding access to space and enabling new scientific investigations. Meanwhile, 4 amateur radio operators here on Earth are the group of 34 volunteers chosen by NASA to track the transmissions from the Orion spacecraft during its 10-day journey.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. I'm Bill, AJ8B. We have a quick summary of the 3 Yankee Zero Kilo DXpedition to Beauvais. The number of QSOs uploaded to Club Log was 102,280. Ken, LA7GIA, who was the team leader, says that 3Y0K was a very successful expedition, quote, where we reached our goals, end quote. The team is now safely back in Cape Town, South Africa. The 20-foot container has been packed for shipment to Texas, quote, in anticipation of our next adventure, as 3 Yankee Zero Lima, Peter the First Island in 2027. We also have a Sable Island, Charlie Yankee Zero Sierra update. The CY0S team departed Sable Island on Tuesday morning, March 31, after 103,145 contacts with 169 DXCC countries. The team members are traveling back to their respective homes over the next few days. OQRS will be available this weekend. The team would like to thank the Parks Canada Sable Island staff members for their outstanding support to the CY0S team. We would also like to thank Sable Aviation and Vision Air Services for transporting the team to the island. And that's 7-3 for Murray, WA4DAN, who was the team leader. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, do what many other listeners have done. Just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll fix you up. So from Tango 31, which is Central Kiribati, we have the following. Tango 31, Tango, Central Kiribati, is up and running. The Rebel DX group is now QRV as T31 TTT on Central Kiribati. As of early today, they were on 10-meter FT8, with other bands expected soon. As context, this DXpedition at Kenton will involve 2 weeks of operations with a possible plan to establish a permanent remote station at the government site on the island. The main focus will be on digital modes, especially to give operators with less powerful stations a good chance to make contacts and to get logged. Duplicate QSOs are not a concern. Participants are welcome to call repeatedly until their contact is confirmed. The team will also have 1 CW and 1 sideband station active as well. The digital operation plan includes running up to 14 radios simultaneously with 2 radios per band. Multiple frequencies will be active at the same time, for instance, such as 28074 and 28090 MHz, using both MSHV multistream and SuperFox modes. As traffic decreases, all stations will return to MSHV multi-stream operation only. So we have an Easter Island update, Charlie Echo Zero Yankee. Marcus, Delta Juliet 4 Echo Limo, is now QRV from Easter Island. He is using Charlie Echo Zero Yankee stroke Delta Juliet 4 Echo Lima. Despite his licensing challenges, his Starlink equipment is prepared for Club Log live streaming during the trip until April 11th. We have an update from Belize, which is Victor 3. Mike, Victor Yankee Zero Zulu Oscar Oscar, who's also known as Victor Echo 2 X-Ray Bravo, is now QRV as V31 Zulu Yankee from several locations in Belize until April the 7th. His holiday-style operation will be using CW and sideband on 80 through 10 meters, and you can QSL that via VE2XB. From the Western Sahara, which is Sugar Zero, we have the following. Nama, who is Sugar 01 Alpha, and Osman, Sugar 01 Alpha Hotel, will be QRV as Sugar Oscar 9 Sierra until May 31st, operating from Tifariti in the Sahrawi Republic to celebrate the 50th anniversary of that republic. They will operate on all bands and all modes. They are running 100 watts from an FTDX 3000 with a dipole antenna and multiband beams. They will be operating QO100 from several grids. Look for Sugar 09 Sugar to also be QRV during the CQWPX CW contest, May 10th to the 31st, QSL via Club Log and LOTW. And here's a little glimpse into the future. We will soon see 3 Oscar Fox Sugar Golf, and that's correct. It's 3 Oscar Fox Sugar Golf. There's no other numbers. From the Republic of Guinea, activated by Elvira, Italy Victor 3 Fox Sugar Golf, from April 11th to April 25th. She will operate HF and 6 meters, all modes, with 2 low power stations and vertical antennas. Elvira expects a couple of daily power outages that will force her off the air, and she will plan accordingly. From the Congo, which is Tango November, we have Father Derek, HF3 Golf Delta, who's now in Brazzaville on a new, quote, pastoral and humanitarian mission, end quote. In West Africa, he also has the call signs of Tango Juliet 1 Golf Delta, Tango Lima 8 Golf Delta, and Tango Tango 1 Golf Delta. In the Congo, he will be Tango November 8 Golf Delta on HF and 6 using the FT modes as well as CW and sideband. He is waiting for his Logbook of the World certificate. Darek is also hoping to set up remote operation capability when the infrastructure there can support it. You can QSL via Club Log OQRS or direct to Sugar Papa 3 Echo Oscar Lima. From Cameroon, which is Tango Juliet, Derek, again, HF3 Golf Delta, will be going to Mondola Island using Tango Juliet 1 Golf Delta stroke P for portable as a tribute to Polish explorer Stefan Zoli Ragądzy on the explorer's 165th birthday. He set up a research station there in 1883. This operation is in April, with April 14th being the actual birth date. Derek plans on this being an annual operation in April. So that's pretty cool. And finally, from French Polynesia, which is Fox Ocean, we have this. Didier, who is Fox Ocean stroke Fox 6 Boston Charlie Whiskey, has 2 operations. He is QRV until April 10th, and then will be QRV from May 5th to July 20th from Tikahau Atoll in Tuamatu. The station is an Elecraft K35 and a 500-watt amplifier, a VDA on 20 through 6 meters, and a vertical on 80 through 30 meters right next to the lagoons, 80 through 6 meters all told, using CW and single sideband. QSL via Fox 6 Echo X-Ray Victor, who also got his pilot back at home. QSL via F6 EXV and Club Log and LOTW will also work. This week, the DX Mentor podcast will feature Charlie Echo 3 stroke November 5 November United and K0MD discussing POTA and DXing from Chile. It was really, really interesting, and I hope you'll give it a listen. Let me know what you think. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-whale, Karen, for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
Welcome to the 50-second segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, hams, organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. With thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for letting us use his website for these segments, we bring you the next chapter of Ham Radio History. April in Paris. This is part 2 of this segment. Although individuals could be members of the IARU at the beginning, each country where there were more than 25 members would have its own section and president. Membership was $1 US per year, separate from the ARRL or QST. The board of directors would consist of these presidents and an elected executive committee, very similar to the league's board. Maxim was elected international president. Gerald Marcus, G2NM international vice president. Jean Mesger, F8GO, and Frank Bell, Z4AA of New Zealand, were appointed as councillors at large, and Warner was named international secretary-treasurer. Together, these officials made up the executive committee, all prominent amateurs active on the air in advancing the boundaries of international communication. Most notable was the election in absentia of Bell as a councillor by virtue of his well-known on-air achievements and organizational involvement at home. Once the voting was over, Warner opened the roll for membership, and Maxim became the first of 112 paying members. Other subcommittees dealt with on-air tests, international wavelength coordination, international language, call signs, and intermediates. Some committees comprised of non-amateurs had their reports adopted but were not binding upon the Union. The Executive Committee would study them later. On 18 April, both Congresses met and ratified all actions, and late arrivals from Russia and Indochina brought the number of participating countries to 25. Amid enthusiastic applause, a bowl of flowers provided by Dr. Mertz of Switzerland was presented to Maxim in the name of the transmitting amateurs of the world. The flowers were then distributed so that everyone could wear one in his lapel at the closing banquet. Knowing that Warner had skipped meals during the Marathon Constitution writing session, the amateurs of Belgium and France presented him with a 3-foot-long, 10-pound ham sandwich. Warner wrote that the next night another little international congress took it to a little sidewalk restaurant across from the hotel, and there it was dispatched muy pronto, washed down with good beer, which didn't happen to be against the law there. Before leaving Paris, the Americans toured some local stations, including FL at the Eiffel Tower. They then stopped over at London for 5 days and attended a dinner hosted by the RSGB. There they met Captain Rex Durant of GHH-1, often heard on the air from Mosul, Mesopotamia. Durant was with the Royal Air Force and had tried to fly in for the Paris Congress, but he was forced to land 14 times en route due to bad weather, and only managed to make it to Marseille by the final day, so he decided to continue on to England directly. By the fall of 1925, the total IARU membership stood at only 698, with 264 from the U.S., disappointingly small, judged Warner. The original concept of a federation of national societies had morphed into an international organization of individual members, largely because some countries did not yet have an amateur radio organization. Most were now unhappy with this arrangement and expected it to change when more membership groups formed autonomous national societies. The next spring, the IARU announced a new International Brass Pounders Club. The WAC Club, Work All Continents, composed of brass-pounding ether burners who have worked at least one station in all 6 continents, Australia, Africa, Asia, Europe, North and South America. To be admitted, amateurs must send in QSL cards as proof, which would then be returned together with the official WAC certificate endorsed by the Grand High Whacker himself, declared its secretary, presumably the current holder of that title. The organizational rearrangement took about a year, and in December 1926, the IARU announced the first steps in transforming itself into a federation. Each section larger than the 25-member minimum would now collect and retain its own dues for use by its section members. Smaller ones could continue to pay dues to the international headquarters in Hartford. Meanwhile, more country societies adopted a variation on the ARRL diamond as their own logo. RSGB officially became the British section of IARU, and coincidentally, the Union announced that the British R system of audibility would be officially endorsed, and that GMT was to be used for all correspondence instead of local time. One ARRL director raised an issue with the use of GMT, which means Greenwich Mean Time, distinguishing it from GCT, or Greenwich Civil Time. He pointed out that amateurs were actually using GCT, which starts at midnight, whereas GMT begins at noon. It seemed a bit late to make an issue of this, since the League and the IARU had both endorsed the use of GMT, and the use of the term seemed to be nearly universal, not just in amateur circles. Yet Warner thought it necessary to advocate switching to GCT. The term would continue to be used in QST for a while until common convention prevailed. As amateur radio expanded worldwide, individual IARU membership became increasingly burdensome to maintain. In the summer of 1928, a new constitution was proposed to reorganize it into a union of country organizations, each of which would maintain its own membership. The remainder of the document was unchanged except to make its language conform to the new organizational model. By a vote of section presidents, it was easily adopted on 30 October 1928, more than 3 years after the organization's founding. In 2014, the IARU had grown to 162 member societies around the world. Still headquartered at ARRL in Newington, Connecticut, it is licensed to operate under its own call sign, NU1AW, from the Maxim Memorial Station, W1AW. Included in this material are quotes from the following: KB Warner, IARU Growth, IARU News, QST, November 1925, page 49. KB Warner, the IARU Editorial QST, September 1926, page 7. KB Warner, A New International Brass Pounders Club, IARU News, QST, April 1926, page 54. KB Warner, IARU News, QST, December 1926, page 57. KB Warner, IARU News, QST, May 1927, page 61. KB Warner, Editorial, QST, March 1927, page 8. KB Warner, New Constitution Proposed, IARU News, QST, August 1928, page 60. With a tip of the TWIAR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
A SpaceX plan for 1 million orbital data centers proposes a massive constellation of sunlit objects that could severely impair ground-based astronomy and increase atmospheric pollution through frequent re-entries in the upper atmosphere. Astronomers warn that these 100-meter-long structures will remain illuminated even at midnight. This constant visibility threatens observations at ground-based observatories, such as the Vera Rubin Observatory and the extremely large telescope currently under construction in Chile. These orbital data centers, potentially 100 meters long, create persistent light streaks that obstruct astronomical research. Positioned in high-inclination orbits at 500 to 2,000 kilometers, remain illuminated by sunlight even at midnight, significantly outshining traditional broadband satellites. Astronomers have filed formal objections with the FCC regarding the January 30th application. This new constellation poses a challenge unlike any encountered in the commercial space era, undermining years of progress. Further, this much hardware results in one spacecraft burning up in the atmosphere every 3 minutes. This mass incineration releases dangerous concentrations of aluminum oxide and lithium, potentially depleting the protective ozone layer and altering global temperatures. Environmental experts highlight risks, but the FCC's fast-track approval process bypasses standard environmental reviews, placing the burden of proof on the scientific community to prevent damage.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. The other day I was playing around with RDS, or Radio Data System. It's a digital signal that's often embedded in a commercial broadcast FM transmission. Among other things, it contains information about the station, its content, frequencies, and potentially other useful information, such as traffic alerts. If you recall, I've been working on 50 things to do with a software-defined radio, and decoding RDS is one of those things. The decoding effort aside, I imagined a screen where you could see the RDS information in real time as it was being transmitted by all the local FM broadcast stations. You'd see what music each station was playing, what their local clock thought the time was, how much they transmit other data, and what they might do for emergencies, like, say, a tropical cyclone heading this way. It occurred to me that this would be an example of a fundamental difference between a traditional radio and a software-defined radio, or SDR. Specifically, we are taught that you tune a radio to a frequency. It demodulates or decodes what's there and plays the sound or digital information or whatever is being transmitted on that frequency. If you want to hear something else, you need to change frequency and the radio decodes that new frequency. If you have multiple channels to choose from, there are ways to automatically switch frequency, one after the other. One of my friends recently discovered an old scanner in a box, and according to the specifications, it can scan 20 stations per second. If all 1,000 stations are programmed, it takes 50 seconds to scan them all. A lot can happen in that time. The traditional solution is having more radios. Ideally, you'd have one for every frequency you care about. Cost aside, logistically this is not fun. Imagine having to power 1,000 radios, or find the one where the volume isn't right, or even find space for them, or antennas. In the SDR world, that's not quite how it works. Instead of tuning to one frequency, you essentially tune to a range of frequencies and then, using software, decode one or more of those frequencies at the same time. Listening to multiple broadcast FM stations like that might not make a whole lot of sense. But what about decoding RDS? Or listening to aviation frequencies? Or local amateur radio repeaters? Or multiple digital modes? While that might sound far-fetched, a $50 RTL SDR dongle can manage 2.5 MHz of bandwidth over USB. By comparison, my $1,000 Yaesu FT857D can receive all of 200 kHz in wideband FM mode, and only whilst tuned to the broadcast band frequencies. In normal AM or FM mode, it's 10 kHz, so you'd need 250 of them to listen to the same frequency range. Again, just so we're clear, in analog radio, you need to change frequency to decode a different signal. In SDR, you can simultaneously decode as many signals as resources permit. For example, I can make a simple GNU radio flow graph, a little program that accepts a command line setting. In GNU radio, it's called a parameter block, and run it with a frequency I'm interested in. Then I can run another copy of the same program with a different frequency. Rinse and repeat, and I have as many receivers as I need. While we're at it, you don't need to run the same program multiple times. You can run an FM decoder, a RTTY decoder, an AM decoder, all at the same time, as long as the frequencies you're looking at fit inside the bandwidth of the receiver you're playing with. Just so we're clear, this is one receiver, one antenna, one power supply with as many decoders as resources allow. In other words, these two methods, analog and SDR, are not the same. Am I glossing over things? Sure. With such a wide bandwidth comes susceptibility to interference and signal overload. Also, the RTL SDR dongle doesn't transmit. Although in 2014 ISMO Oscar Hotel 2 Foxtrot Tango Golf managed to change the center frequency of his dongle 300 times per second, causing the onboard oscillator to leak in a controlled manner, making a frequency shift keyed or FSK transmission. Yes, I know that's not quite up to the standard of a transmission coming from an 857D. You'll also need a computer, which you don't need to run an analog radio. Though, truth be told, an analog radio from the last couple of decades is pretty much a computer anyway. You can likely get away with a Raspberry Pi to process the data coming from an RTL SDR dongle, so another $5. And yes, you'll need a monitor, keyboard and a power supply. The point I'm making is that these two methods are not the same, and in the evolving world of amateur radio, there's space for both. It also means that once you have this infrastructure, you can start experimenting with new radio technologies and approaches. Will it make my 857D and its siblings obsolete? Perhaps, but I doubt it. There's still plenty of valve radios going around, not to mention the spark gap transmitter at Grimeton in Sweden. In other words, this is growing the hobby, which ultimately is why I'm here. I will mention that it's not all hot cocoa and cookies. I spent the past 2 days attempting to figure out why my very simple AM decoder isn't actually playing back the local ATIS or Automatic Terminal Information Service, and why macOS SDR applications don't include SOAPy SDR support. Because of course they don't. Oh yeah, I'm still trying to get my Proxmox server guest audio to work. I'm sharing this to make sure that you understand that just like creating your own circuit board design and building it, there's plenty of experimentation to be done, problems to solve and challenges to meet. Ultimately, we're playing at the bleeding edge. At least it's not with sharp or hot implements. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The National Voice of America Museum of Broadcasting is welcoming Hamvention guests by offering extended hours from Thursday, May 14th through Sunday, May 17th. The museum and the Westchester Amateur Radio Association, which is headquartered there, will be sharing a wide variety of exhibits that include a disc jockey setup from a vintage radio station, vintage ham and shortwave equipment, and the Voice of America's first transmitter dating from 1942. The club's ham radio station, Whiskey Charlie 8, Victor Oscar Alpha, will be sharing access to its shack, so come with your license and be prepared to get on the air. Admission is $10 at the door. For each day's extended hours and for directions on how to find the museum from Xenia, visit the website voamuseum.org or Whiskey Charlie 8, Victor Oscar Alpha.org. The independent nonprofit museum in Westchester, Ohio, is not affiliated with the U.S. government's Voice of America service.
Even as Canada moves to shut down its nationwide weather radio services, lawmakers in the U.S. are looking to commit funds that would modernize and expand the radio network of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency. Lawmakers in Washington, D.C. have moved ahead with their commitment to invest $100 million in improved antennas and transmitter equipment to expand coverage for the VHF weather radio service of NOAA. A bipartisan measure that authorizes the expense was passed recently by members of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. An estimated 1,030 such weather stations hold licenses to operate on 162 megahertz. The antenna and transmitter additions and upgrades focus on NOAA's weather radio service in remote areas of the U.S. that have a higher risk of extreme weather. Beyond VHF improvements, the bill calls for NOAA to explore options on the microwave band to further strengthen the network's ability to communicate warnings about hazardous conditions. Other language in the bill directs NOAA to explore the possibility of satellite backup or partnerships with commercial providers. The action in Washington stands in sharp contrast to a recent announcement by the Meteorological Service of Canada, that nation's equivalent of NOAA, that it was ending Weather Radio, its own national VHF radio weather service. The U.S. lawmakers' measure moves next for a vote in the full House, but is not yet on the calendar. The action on Capitol Hill comes almost a year after the White House announced that the administration was looking to cut NOAA's weather research centers, particularly those focused on understanding climate change.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Several months ago, I spoke of the CubeSat SIM kits. They are still available. AMSAT has developed a smaller version that does not include rechargeable batteries, solar panels, power board, or a frame. This low-cost version, called CubeSat SIM Lite, does have a Raspberry Pi Zero with preloaded micro SD card, 2 SMA antennas, a USB sound card, a Pi camera, and a USB power cable with power supply. You can simulate transmissions that would typically be transmitted by a satellite. Once it is powered up, the unit will immediately begin transmitting simulated telemetry in 7 different modes, including FunCube and a crossband repeater mode. They are available from AMSAT.org in the store and shipped to only addresses in the United States. There are 16 new satellites that have been launched recently, with 6 carrying amateur payloads. We will have more information on them in the weeks ahead. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for our weekly look at space weather conditions and the terrestrial propagation forecast. Solar activity has been at low levels with only C-class flares produced by regions 4401, 05, and 09. There were 9 numbered active regions on the solar disk, with 4409 showing the most significant growth during the period and producing the largest flares on April 1st. A new region emerged, but it has not yet been numbered. Multiple filaments erupted during the day on April 1st, producing coronal mass ejections observed in coronagraph imagery, but their propagation modeling did not suggest impacts to Earth. The exceptions are the ejecta first observed at Gong H alpha images on April 1st. Solar activity is likely to reach minor to moderate levels with a slight chance for X-class flares through April 4th, due primarily to the flare potential of regions 4404, 05, and 09. Solar wind parameters were near nominal levels, with solar wind speed averaging around 440 kilometers per second. Enhanced solar wind disturbances are likely through April 2nd due to the arrival of the March 30th coronal mass ejection. Conditions are likely to give way to coronal hole high-speed stream activity by mid to late April 2nd. The next increase in solar activity will likely occur in the last third of April. Daily MUF values will rise again, and at the same time a sporadic E-layer will begin to appear occasionally in mid-latitudes. Although it will not yet have a significant impact on shortwave propagation, it will occasionally cause interesting DX openings on the shortest of the shortwave bands. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Carla Wetzelschwab K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the Voice of America CAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport this week, April 2nd and 3rd, it's the Walk for the Bacon QRP contest. That is CW. April 4th and 5th, the YBDXPI single sideband contest. That's phone. April 4th and 5th as well, EA RIDI contest, digital. April 4th and 5th, Louisiana QSO party, CW phone and digital there. April 4th and 5th as well, the Mississippi QSO party, that's CW phone and digital. April 4th and 5th, it's the XPDX contest, CW and phone. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions on April 4th, it's the RARS Fest hosting the ARRL Roanoke Division Convention. That's in Raleigh, North Carolina. April 10th through the 11th, it's the Greene County Hamfest hosting the ARRL Oklahoma Section Convention in Claremont, Oklahoma. And on April 18th, the Delmarva Amateur Radio and Electronics Expo hosting the ARRL Delaware State Convention. That's in Georgetown, Delaware. And make sure to remember to search the ARRL Hamfest and Convention database to find more events in your area. The following America 250 W1AW portable activations begin at 000 Zulu on Wednesdays and end at 2359 Zulu on Tuesdays. That's 7 days total for each activation. And you can see the complete schedule at www.arrl.org/America250-WAS. April 1st, 2026, California, W1AW/6. The host there is NZulu6Q. Also on April 1st, Mississippi, W1AW/5. The host is W5UE. April 1st as well, 2026, North Carolina, W1AW/4. The host is N4XI. April 8th, 2026, Washington, W1AW/7. The host is W7MKE. And on April 8th as well, 2026, New Mexico, W1AW/5. The host is KA8JMW.
It is time for this week's edition of Satellite Shorts from All Over, and we begin this week with word that a unique NASA astronomy satellite may soon undergo an unprecedented rescue attempt as it faces an early end in orbit. The Neil Gehrels Swift Observatory, launched in 2004 to study gamma-ray bursts, has been out of operation for more than a month and is gradually losing altitude due to atmospheric drag. NASA has awarded a $30 million contract to Catalyst Space Technologies to develop a robotic servicing spacecraft that will attempt a rendezvous with Swift and raise its orbit, extending the mission's life. The planned rescue mission, scheduled for launch as early as June, would mark one of the first commercial attempts to dock with and service a satellite not originally designed for in-orbit repair. Engineers face significant challenges, including tight timelines, uncertain spacecraft conditions, and the risks associated with docking two large objects in low Earth orbit. If successful, the mission could demonstrate a lower-cost approach to satellite servicing while preserving a valuable scientific asset. Next, about a month after an onboard anomaly caused a loss of contact with the Proba 3 coronagraph spacecraft, mission controllers have successfully reestablished communication. The Villafranca ground station in Spain, operated by the European Space Agency, received telemetry from the spacecraft confirming it is once again transmitting health and status data. The coronagraph is currently in a stable safe mode while engineers conduct detailed system checks to assess any potential damage. Its solar panel is properly oriented toward the sun, allowing essential systems to remain powered and the battery to recharge. After weeks exposed to extreme cold, the spacecraft's components will require time to warm up before normal operations can resume. Mission officials say the recovery is an encouraging milestone, though careful analysis and gradual recovery steps will be required before the mission can fully return to nominal activities. And finally, Roscosmos launched Progress 94 cargo spacecraft at 11:59 UTC Sunday, March 22nd, aboard a Soyuz rocket from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, carrying approximately 3 tons of food, fuel, and supplies for the Expedition 74 crew aboard the International Space Station. The spacecraft was originally expected to dock autonomously at the space-facing port of the Poisk module on Tuesday, March 24th, following a 2-day flight. Shortly after reaching orbit, one of its 2 Kurs automated rendezvous antennas failed to deploy as planned, though all other systems continued to operate normally. As a result, cosmonaut Sergei Kuzverchkov manually piloted the spacecraft during final approach, using the Toru remote control system from inside the Sveta service module. Progress 94 successfully docked at 1340 UTC on Tuesday, March 24th, completing the resupply mission despite the earlier anomaly. The spacecraft is expected to remain docked for about 6 months before departing the station for a planned destructive re-entry, disposing of trash loaded by the crew.
ICOM UK has equipped the RSGB National Radio Center with the IC905 all-mode transceiver as part of its ongoing support for the RSGB and the amateur radio community. This latest edition ensures that volunteers and visitors to the prestigious Bletchley Park facility have access to the latest VHF, UHF, and SHF technology. The IC905 is an industry first, providing seamless multi-mode coverage across the 144, 430, 1200, 2400, 5600 MHz, and 10 GHz bands. The arrival of the IC905 opens up new avenues for the National Radio Center, from linking local repeaters to monitoring radio beacons for the study of microwave propagation. National Radio Center volunteers were keen to see firsthand the IC905 and operate the industry-first multi-mode VHF, UHF, SHF transceiver. With no previous microwave-capable transceiver at the National Radio Center, volunteers are particularly interested to see how the radio functions and what is possible. This support highlights ICOM's ongoing mission to support amateur radio and the educational work carried out by the Radio Society of Great Britain. By supplying cutting-edge hardware, ICOM UK helps ensure that the National Radio Center remains a world-class hub for radio amateurs and newcomers alike.
A new open-source software project called Ground Station is gaining attention among amateur satellite operators as a unified platform for tracking, receiving, and decoding satellite signals. The software combines multiple functions typically handled by separate tools into a single system, offering a more streamlined approach to satellite operations. Tracking programs, SDR control software, recording tools, and decoding utilities are often used together, sometimes requiring manual setup for each pass. Ground Station aims to simplify this process by automating the workflow from pass prediction through signal reception and decoding. At its core, the software provides real-time satellite tracking using orbital data, along with automatic updates of satellite elements. It supports a variety of software-defined radios, allowing users to monitor and record signals from multiple satellites. The system also includes automated antenna rotator control and Doppler correction, helping keep signals centered during a pass. The platform is capable of scheduling and executing satellite observations automatically, reducing the need for operator intervention. During a pass, it can record IQ or audio data and process common digital modes, including telemetry formats used by many amateur satellites. This is useful for operators interested in telemetry collection, CubeSat monitoring, and general satellite experimentation. In addition to amateur radio satellites, the software integrates with tools such as SatDump to decode weather satellite transmissions, including NOAA, APT, and other imaging formats. This expands its usefulness beyond traditional amateur satellites to include weather satellite reception and other downlink services commonly monitored by the amateur community. Ground Station is an early-stage, actively developed open-source project available on GitHub. Users can learn more about the software and access installation instructions there. As development continues, it offers a path toward more fully integrated ground stations, lowering the barrier to entry for satellite reception while providing experienced operators with a flexible new tool to explore.
While you may have never heard of TAT-8, there's a good chance you have sent some data through it. TAT-8 was the 8th transatlantic communications cable and the first transatlantic fiber optic cable carrying 560 megabits per second on two fibers between Tuckerton, New Jersey and, thanks to an underwater splitting device, Widemouth Bay, England and Penmarch, France. Construction of the cable began in 1998. Later that year, the first call made by Isaac Asimov took place. The cable was retired in 2002. Now, Subsea Environmental Services is recovering the cable for recycling. The 6,000-kilometer cable was built by a consortium of companies including AT&T, France Telecom, and British Telecom. The 1.3-micron fiber used special optical repeaters about 40 kilometers apart and cost about $335 million, which would be just shy of $1 billion today. Designers were optimistic, with some claiming the cable would end the need for future cables, or at least that the cable would not reach capacity for 10 years or more. In reality, the cable was saturated within 18 months. Turns out the equivalent of 40,000 phone lines wasn't enough. In all fairness, the saturation might have been difficult to predict, but it may also have been hastened by the cable itself. In 1989, IBM funded a dedicated T1 link between CERN and Cornell University. 10 months later, Tim Berners-Lee would use this link to demonstrate his new development, the World Wide Web. According to Subsea Environmental Services, the cable still looked new after lying on the seabed for 4 decades.
The FCC, Federal Communications Commission in the United States, has banned new foreign-made consumer internet routers over national security concerns. In an update on Monday to a list of equipment seen as not secure enough for use, the Federal Communications Commission added all consumer-grade routers made outside the U.S. It puts routers, which are used widely in homes and businesses to connect computers, phones, TVs, and other devices to the internet, on a par with foreign-made drones, which were banned at the end of last year. Malicious actors have exploited security gaps in foreign-made routers to attack American households, disrupt networks, enable espionage, and facilitate intellectual property theft, the FCC said. While people will still be able to use foreign-made routers they already own, the ban applies to all new device models. The ban stems from growing concern over the last year that routers were a point of easy access for malicious actors. TP-Link, a router brand made in China that is a bestseller on Amazon, became the subject of some U.S. political anxiety last year after a spate of cyber attacks. Any new router made outside the U.S. will now need to be approved by the FCC before it can be imported, marketed, or sold in the country. In order to get that approval, companies manufacturing routers outside the U.S. must apply for a conditional approval in a process that will require the disclosure of the firm's foreign investors or influence, as well as a plan to bring the manufacturing of the routers to the U.S. Certain routers may be exempted from the list if they are deemed acceptable by the Department of Defense or the Department of Homeland Security, the FCC said. Neither agency has yet added any specific routers to its list of equipment exceptions. The FCC's move follows a decision on Friday by government agencies working on national security that internet routers made overseas pose unacceptable risks to the U.S. The FCC noted that malicious access to routers was involved in 3 cyber attacks referred to as Volt, Flax, and Salt Typhoon, aimed at U.S. infrastructure between 2024 and 2025. U.S. government investigations into those attacks blamed actors within or working on behalf of the Chinese government. The vast majority of internet routers are assembled or manufactured outside the U.S., often in Taiwan or China. The FCC ban applies even if a router is designed in the U.S. but built abroad. Popular brands of routers in the U.S. include Netgear, a U.S. company which manufactures all of its products abroad. One exception to the general absence of US-made routers is the newer Starlink Wi-Fi router. Starlink is part of Elon Musk's company SpaceX. The company says the Starlink routers are made in Texas.
The Wellesley Amateur Radio Society, WARS, in Wellesley, Massachusetts, is celebrating its 75th anniversary in 2026. Founded in 1951, WARS has provided public service, education and seminars, field day and contest coordination, and a genuine sense of community for nearly three-quarters of a century. 1951 also marked other historic milestones, including the first coast-to-coast television broadcast, the first UNIVAC computer, the ratification of the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and the start of the Korean War armistice talks. The official date of the celebration is Saturday, May 2nd, 2026. For more information, visit the WARS website.
And finally this week, the Azores Amateur Radio Association, CU2ARA, is marking an important anniversary this year with the installation of its first 10-meter repeater. The group says its presence in the North Atlantic holds great promise for contacts between hams in Europe and North America. On São Miguel Island, the largest island in the Azores off the coast of Portugal, a new 10-meter FM repeater stands ready for QSOs. This is the first 10-meter repeater for the association, which is marking the 50th year since its founding. The 50-watt repeater transmits on 29.630 MHz with a minus 100 kHz shift, giving it a receive frequency of 29.530 MHz. It has a CT-CSS tone of 88.5 Hz. Bruno, CS8ABG, went on to say that the challenges in installation prompted the group to install the receiver and transmitter separately. The transmitter is located in the center of the island, and the receiver is about 20 kilometers away on the western side. Both are at an altitude of 900 meters. The sites are connected using 5 GHz Wi-Fi links. The site holds promise for other connections too, according to Bruno. There is a Raspberry Pi system with a private All-Star Link connection that may someday provide a link to the group's VHF repeaters that are part of the Azores All-Star Link network. Bruno went on to say that the east-west radiation pattern of the dipoles favor propagation between Europe and North America, so DXers, of course, are very welcome.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters around the country and around the world, on great repeater systems like WA3PBD repeater system, on Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. on 146.730 and 223.940, covering all of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.